Okay, what does that say?
Okay, they're saying they can see you.
Okay,
Yay!
so...
Okay, we're back. Yes, I see us now.
All right.
Sorry about that. So what we were talking about was when I call you Michael. We're friends,
Yeah.
neighbors, friends with his family. But so some people call you Brother Rush. When you were studying Ezra's Eagle for years later, after having studied it as a young man, you received tremendous revelation.
Well, you know, I don't want to create the wrong impression here, like I received, you know, some kind of vision about, you know, Ezra's Eagle, because that was not what happened. It was like, I'm reading this, and as I'm reading it, it's like, you know, when you're reading a really good book, and you're just imagining it in your mind playing out. I mean, that's what it was like for me. I was just seeing everything. I knew exactly what it was talking about as I was reading it. There was nothing that was confusing for me. It was as clear as a bell. But it was only that way after I understood, you know, what was going to happen in the last days as it pertains to the house of Israel. So most people, when they read Ezra's Eagle, they're reading it in a vacuum because, you know, Ezra's Eagle is exciting, it's interesting, it's applicable, it's playing out right before our eyes. But the fact of the matter is when Ezra was given this vision, the angel tells him, hey, the reason you are receiving this vision is because your brother Daniel and Ezra were contemporaries in captivity in Babylon. Okay. So the angel says, your brother Daniel had a vision about this, but this particular part was not expounded to him. So I am going to expound it to you now. That part that he's talking about that was given to Daniel, it's Daniel 11. Daniel chapter 11, which is why I wrote this book, Daniel 11, just on that chapter. So it's meant as a supplement to an earlier revelation, not as its own standalone revelation.
Okay.
And, you know, so...
You've often said that it's the gathering of Israel and the return of the lost 10 tribes that is the major event.
That is, yeah, when you're talking about the last days, you know, if you don't understand what's going to happen with the house of Israel, you don't understand the last days. I mean, you can understand Ezra's Eagle and still have no clue about what the world is about to experience.
Okay. And that's all found in 3rd Nephi, in Daniel.
Daniel chapter 11 is specifically what Ezra received. He received this vision as a supplement to that.
Okay.
But all of this is related. Nephi and Daniel were contemporaries. I mean, this is kind of the golden age of revelation regarding the future of the house of Israel. Nephi's over in America. Daniel is in Babylon. They both left Jerusalem, you know, at similar times, at similar ages. And the Lord gave them both profound knowledge with regards to what was going to happen in our day. And so Ezra is just seeing a supplement to that. Ezra saw incredible things about our day, not just Ezra's Eagle.
Okay. So President Nelson tells us that we have this front row seat to the most incredible events ever to unfold in history. Can you tell us a little bit about what we can expect to see unfolding? Well,
so that quote, he said, you are going to see the most incredible miracles the world has ever seen in coming days. And specifically in the scriptural record, it talks about the restoration of the house of Israel rivaling the exodus of Egypt for its wonder and its might. And that people will not even remember the exodus of Egypt. They'll cease to talk about it. The only thing anyone will ever want to talk about going forward is the restoration of the house of Israel. Now, think about that. Most people have no clue
No.
about why that is going to be so magnificent. And I'm saying, and I want everyone to understand before we jump into all the symbolism behind Ezra's eagle, is that it's critical. It's far more important for you to understand what is going to happen with the house of Israel than it is the particulars of Ezra's eagle, because Ezra's eagle is, it's coming to its end. We still have 3 eagle heads, and then we're going to be in some heavy, heavy stuff, which is where the restoration of the house of Israel comes into play. So
there's been some questions on timing of that.
Uh-huh.
Is that after the stout horn? Is it during the stout horn? Do they?
Well, let me.
The last 10 come after.
You were talking to me a little bit earlier about some people having questions about some of the symbolism with Ezra's eagle. So how about I just kind of give a brief overview of what the vision is.
Okay.
And then you can ask any follow-up question on that. So Ezra sees this vision of a country. He's told that it's a country. It's represented by an eagle with 3 heads. And the eagle has 20 feathers on it. And while he's seeing this eagle, he hears this voice come out of the eagle's bowels, right? And anytime anyone's hearing noises coming from your bowels, it's not good, right? Things aren't going well. So, and that's what the angel says. It says, hey, you see how that voice came from the eagle's bowels and not its head? That means that this country is going to experience a time of great distress, and that it will be at the point of failing. But it will not fail. It will be restored to its beginning.
Okay.
And that sounds exactly like when Joseph Smith said, hey, there will come a time where the Constitution of the United States of America will dangle by a thread. Mm-hmm. But the actual quote is that some foreign saints will come and save it.
Okay, interesting, because that quote that you mentioned from Joseph Smith is a bit of an apocryphal story, right? It's not written by him. It's told secondhand, from what I understand.
And there's let's not get these things confused, because and this is another kind of a tangent. Let's put this one on hold, and let me just finish this going through the symbolism here.
Okay.
So then after the voice, the eagle, you realize this eagle has 20 feathers. Yeah. And the angel tells him, notice that there are 14 long feathers on this eagle, and there's 8 short feathers on this eagle. There's 12 long feathers, and there's 8 short feathers.
Okay.
And so his angelic guide tells him that the short feathers are people's, are kings. Everybody in this is a king, and they're told these are consecutive kings. And keep in mind that up until this point, every kingdom on the face of the planet was ruled by a king. You didn't have representative republics. You didn't have presidents. So, this is being described to Ezra in terms that he can understand it. So, there will be leaders in this country that will serve consecutively. And some of these leaders will not serve as long as they were supposed to serve. So that is what constitutes a long feather and a short feather. The angel tells him that in this series, the second of these feathers will serve twice as long as any other leader of this country. And no one else will be able to serve more than half as long as that.
Okay. And that symbolizes?
Well, so the only leader in American history to ever have served more than 2 terms is FDR, who was elected for 4 terms.
Yeah.
Now, FDR died of natural causes during his 4th term. There was a bunch of uproar about that because he kind of kept his sickness, private. But he died of natural causes, and he had 4 terms. He was elected to 4 terms.
Can I ask you, because this has come up, why do the feathers start with, who is it, Herbert Hoover?
Yeah, so I'll answer that as soon as I get through this range of feathers, and we identify. So if the second feather is is FDR, then the first one has to be Herbert Hoover, who served right before him.
And why we don't go back further?
Yeah, and so that's a fantastic question, and it's one that I asked myself. So, why not start with George Washington?
Yeah.
He was awesome, But Herbert Hoover. I mean, nobody talks about Herbert Hoover. So why him? Why start with him? Well, the reason that I have come to believe, Ezra Taft Benson, who, I believe this is not a coincidence that we have Ezra and Ezra Taft Benson. Ezra Taft Benson served in the presidency of one of these feathers for 8 years.
Yes. Eisenhower.
And he said, hey, there's super combinations going on in America. And from the pulpit, he was an apostle while he was serving in Eisenhower. He was the
Secretary of Agriculture.
That's correct. So he went to General Conference and said, hey, everybody needs to read this book. None dare call it a conspiracy. And if you've read that book, None Dare Call It a Conspiracy, it's about the formation of this group called the Council on Foreign Relations.
Okay.
And the Council on Foreign Relations was founded, one of its founding members was Herbert Hoover.
Okay.
So this Council on Foreign Relations has, according to this book, None Dare Call It a Conspiracy, has kind of a dual purpose. It's got this front, which is, to help the government, make good foreign policy decisions and, to guide them along in policy. And then, there is a darker, more Gadianton robber type, structure behind that. And so all of the short feathers are short feathers because of the intervention of the conspiring leaders of this organization. So
and it's still going on now.
And oh yes, yeah, and it's still very going. I mean, think of it as the deep state, because the deep state, no one had ever heard that word before President Trump's administration. And now, we hear that term all the time, and we see news stories about it all the time. So what the Council on Foreign Relations was fantastic at doing was creating a high-profile club. I mean, if you were anyone in politics, you had to be a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, and it's by invitation only. And so, I mean, they were looking for people that they thought, hey, that person would be an asset. And, the members of the Council on Foreign Relations would fill cabinet positions. They would be presidents. They'd be vice presidents. I mean, any major position in government is affiliated with, the Council on Foreign Relations members. So,
so that's why it starts with Hoover.
So that's why it starts in Hoover, in my opinion. I mean, the angel obviously doesn't say anything about this.
Right. Well, we should say this is all your interpretation.
Absolutely. Yeah.
To be.
I mean, one of the things that is, very important for everybody to understand that reads my books is, that I I don't claim to have any special knowledge or information about anything like this. I have never had any visions or dreams or angels appearing to me telling me what this means. So I would encourage readers of my material to look at them as not as the gospel truth, but as a resource for you to obtain the truth. And it's I know that I have made mistakes in my books, and I think that, but I also know that the majority of all of these pieces that come into play are real. The pattern is absolutely real.
Yeah.
And so, yes, I know that I've made mistakes in some of these things.
Okay.
And particularly when you get into things that haven't been revealed, like secret combinations, who's in control and who's pulling the strings. I mean, they're secret for a reason, right?
Right.
You don't
You're
know.
not gonna tell us?
So you're speculating on these kinds of things.
Okay.
But you asked the question, and that's my opinion of why these feathers start when they do.
That's great. So then we get to JFK,
Mm-hmm.
assassinated while in office. That's
Yes.
a short feather. And the other one is Richard Nixon, resigns
correct.
while in office after Watergate scandal.
Forced to resign.
Forced to resign, okay. And then that wing ends, it's Barack Obama, and then we move over
So
to...
one very important thing
Yeah,
is the angel told Ezra, hey, when you see the second of these two short feathers, the middle time of this timeline is approaching.
right.
So when you take this series of 14 feathers, which includes the two feathers,
Okay,
JFK and Nixon, and you line up those administrations,
yeah,
and then you look at Richard Nixon's administration, it's the midpoint of that line.
until what?
The exact midpoint would be 2 years after Barack Obama's administration
But the
ended.
midpoint
So
till
it'd be
what? Like,
Well, he said this whole vision is building up to this major disastrous event that causes this eagle to almost collapse, to almost fail.
okay,
So this is a countdown to that event.
okay. So about 2 years ago is when the ball gets rolling in that direction.
Now, he said the midpoint approaches. So we're not setting our watches by
Okay.
this, but we know that it has to start in the presidency of President Trump, because otherwise Nixon would not be the one that indicated the midpoint of the timeline. It would have been the next guy.
Okay,
So that's very significant, in this whole thing. And then after President Obama's administration, you have 6 feathers remaining, all of which in the vision are short.
okay. That's a big question for right now. President Trump's feather is short, but his time is apparently running out, right? It looks like Joe Biden's going to be inaugurated in January. And so now we're not advocating for something bad to happen to anybody, but there has to be, in order for him to be a short feather, he doesn't serve out the time that you said, the time that he's supposed to.
That's
What
right.
does this
So
mean
what
going
this
forward?
means, again, a person serving a short, being a short feather, has nothing to do with how many years they were in office. Like, for example, JFK gets killed, right? And then you've got, Lyndon Johnson who comes in.
Yeah,
That's a little stub period. You've
Yeah.
got,
Joe Ford.
yeah, that's a little stub period. But guess what? He served as long as he was supposed to.
Okay.
And
So there's no way for us to know how long Donald Trump is supposed to serve. We just,
well, no, you would know that. I mean, you're going to know that. Say, the end of Donald Trump's official term in office would be January 20th.
yes,
So if Donald Trump does not make it to January 20th, then you know, hey, he was taken out before the end of his 4-year term.
Yeah.
But, I mean, this election is unlike any election in American history, where you have one side saying, hey, there has been, voter fraud to an extent that's never been seen in the country's history before. So just throw out all the headlines, okay? And regardless of whether you're in your heart you hate Trump or you love him, whether you think Biden would be the breath of fresh air for the country or not, you have this prophecy that is, 500 years old. And in the prophecy it says, hey, during the administration of this person, something's going to happen. And so we are seeing something happen. So this is not coincidence. We are seeing Ezra's eagle unfold right now. We still don't know how it's going to be. Is Donald Trump going to be removed from office because of some massive election fraud? Is Donald Trump going to be removed from office in some other horrible way? We don't know. But, it's literally, we're going to be reading about this in our news.
Yeah. And so let's say he just serves until January 20th. Joe Biden takes over. We just have to make an assumption at that point that it was election fraud. No, or something.
Well, I don't think that if you believe that Ezra's eagle, at that point you would have to say Ezra's eagle is either wrong. Yeah. All of this, talk of election fraud and these 700 signed affidavits of people saying, I saw this happen. There's a truck driver who drove, 300,000 votes from New York to Pennsylvania and says, yeah, this is weird. And then someone stole my trailer and those votes are gone. You have to just say, yeah, all of that was just, this is just some big coincidence.
Okay.
Or you have to say, yes, Ezra saw this happen, and it happened. Trump lost because of the intervention of the deep state.
Okay. Now, the news media would say there's no evidence. And
absolutely, that's what.
Right.
Yeah.
So you sound like but to walk around talking about election fraud, the average person kind of sound like a nut. So you have to.
So let's think about this.
Yeah.
So the Book of Mormon is the template for our day. Okay? In the Book of Mormon, we have, somebody, think about what would happen if the Gadianton robbers were in control of the press. What would the headlines be when Captain Moroni decides, you know what, I am going to gather up an army and I'm going to go march to the head of the government and I am going to start killing people. And I am going to, he tells Pahoran, I'm coming and get on board or I'm going to take you out. And we know that Pahoran was struggling because there was a secret society that was trying to overthrow him. Yeah. And it was the Kingman, right? And so Pahoran writes back to Captain Moroni and says, hey, the Kingman, I'm outside the city walls and they've kicked me out. I know that this what they're doing is wrong, and now they're trying to get the Lamanites in here, and the government was being overthrown. And so then here comes Captain Moroni with
the big flag.
He rallies this, he's literally doing rallies across the country as he's going to Zarahemla. Yeah. And then once he gets there, he goes to town on these guys. But imagine what the news narrative is being put out from the Kingman. What are you reading about? You're reading about, Captain Moroni, how he's a usurper, how he's,
He won't let it go.
Yeah, exactly.
He won't walk away gracefully.
So you can see these same things. And we know that the Nephites, the majority of the Nephites, they didn't want to accept that their government had been infiltrated. Remember Nephi, on his garden tower, praying for the people. And, they're saying, what's going on? Why is this guy praying for us? We're righteous. We don't need him to be praying for us. What's going on?
Yeah.
And then he gives this big revelation about how the government has been infiltrated by Gadiantans and they're murdering each other. And, the press, whoever is in control of these institutions, can control the narrative. And that is very important. Think about the Jews. The Jews were threatened by Jesus Christ. Because if Jesus Christ can come and save you, you don't need us to administer the law. And we have these awesome lifestyles.
Yeah.
And so this man is a false Messiah. And the narrative was pushed out through the synagogues.
You no longer need the law of Moses.
Christ was bringing a radical doctrine. But they were opposing him because it impacted their power and control. And so the narrative, they were very effective in controlling the narrative. Very few Jews joined the church. Most Bible scholars say it was probably less than 2% of the Jews followed Christ and became Christians.
Well, because there's this pressure, if you don't follow the narrative, you look like you're intolerant, you're ignorant, you're uneducated, you're a conspiracy theorist.
These things are all very
really
easy to throw shade on these kinds of things because, if you can control the narrative, you can make people look stupid.
Yes.
Make them look foolish. That's why the Jews who could control the narrative could get people to stone and kill the prophets. Mm-hmm. And, what is so interesting is, the Nephites who survived all of this tumult and destruction in America, one of the primary things that Christ told them, hey, you were saved because you didn't stone and kill the prophets. That seems like a pretty low bar, right? How many of us are going to go and stone and kill the prophets? But what it's really talking about is, you don't have to stone and kill somebody. You can just be so angry and buy into this false narrative, right?
Yeah.
And so that's why it's so important to be awake to what's going on. And that's one of the blessings of Ezra's eagle, is it shows you there is something happening in America. Wake up.
Okay.
It's another testament that's outside of the Book of Mormon. The Book of Mormon says, hey, you're going to have secret combinations, and when you see these things happening, you got to wake up. Because this brought us down, it brought the Jaredites down, it will bring you down. And now we're seeing them. But the majority of people, how can you say the majority? There's a lot of people that don't see it, don't want to see it. It's crazy, it's uncomfortable.
It is, and like you said, nobody wants to appear stupid, and it's considered more educated to read these media outlets. And so let's talk about what's coming up next then. So we have 3 more short feathers after Trump's short feather. So we've gone over the scenarios of how that could work.
You've got 4 more.
4 more, okay. So we've gone over the scenarios of how that would work. If Trump somehow doesn't make it to January 20th, Mike Pence becomes a short feather. If he does make it to January 20th, Joe Biden is a short feather. And then these next 3 only serve very short amounts of time, right?
That's correct. So specifically, the angel tells Ezra, okay, so the person who serves after Trump is going to serve less time than Trump.
And that person definitely gets in.
It says that he's set up. So set up means, he is sworn in and in office. Now, there are so many ways that this could play out that,
and we've gone over them on this segment.
it's not really a good use of time
Right.
to hash out all the possible ways. We're going to see it happen. I mean, we're talking weeks. We've got to know.
Exactly,
You know,
right, the clock is ticking, and that's why, after the election, people were writing on the Ezra site, well, what now? It was very confusing, and so we'll just have to wait and see, but we do have 4 more.
Yeah, so what happened, it's going to happen quickly. Because you've got the next person that is set up, serves less time than Trump, okay? We'll see who that person is and how they're set up, and then we'll have a better idea. But the next 2 people, and this is very interesting, because in this whole series of 20 feathers, there's 2 clusters of people, and they're the very last 2 feathers and the 2 feathers before them that are spoken of only together.
Okay, so it's a team.
So they are joined, unlike the other ones who were individual people.
Okay.
So what the vision says is that there will be 2 people who think in their hearts, we're going to do this. And as they think in their hearts, the largest eagle head wakes up and devours them. So in light of what's going on right now, if there is a deep state, and if it is conspiring to overthrow the country, and if something happens to threaten that plan, then you could see that you may have 2 people stand up, a president and a vice president, and they are going to be set up. But before they are set up, the eagle comes down and destroys them. So I'm not saying that this is going to happen, but here is a scenario where this might make sense. Okay. So say that these lawsuits drag out.
Yeah.
January 20th is the deadline.
Yeah.
So if we get tied up in legalities, then the Constitution has a provision for what happens next.
Yes.
If the Electoral College doesn't elect somebody, then you've got someone that can serve as an interim president, and it would be the Speaker of the House.
Yeah, Nancy Pelosi.
So and we don't know who it's going to be, because you're going to have to vote a new Speaker of the House in. So it's probably going to be her, but let's just leave it to titles, right?
Sure. Speaker
of the House, okay? So you'd have the Speaker of the House, who would then have to oversee this whole congressional election process, which the Constitution says, there is a process that kicks in. If the Electoral College doesn't work, there is another process that kicks in, and that has kicked in before, 3 times, I believe. So that process is different, and the Speaker of the House would have to oversee it. And so under this kind of scenario, you have a temporary president, right, who's going to be in there less time than Trump, because it's not going to take 4 years to resolve this, under this scenario.
Okay.
And then say this process goes through the Congress and doesn't turn out the way the deep state wants it to, but there is a decision where there's 2 people that are going to be set up, and they're the wrong 2 people. The Ezra's eagle says it wakes up and devours them. Okay. So that is a scenario. Now, again, I'm not saying that that's going to be what happens. I am saying we don't have to wait for very long to be able to know.
So we can speculate for now, but it won't be long. Can you tell us more about the eagle heads? Mm-hmm. There are 3.
Yeah, so...
What do they symbolize exactly?
Yeah, so actually, Ezra's angelic guide is very specific about this. Okay. He says that the first eagle head rules the globe with more tyranny than any leader that's ever come before him.
So we haven't seen this eagle head yet, have we?
No, no, he's not in power yet. Trump is in power.
Okay.
We don't know who the eagle head is.
But is this person on the world stage at this point?
You know, that would be speculative to say.
Okay.
I mean, people can theorize about this all they want. But, you know, and I mean, if you want my opinion, I'll give it to you.
Sure.
So Dick Cheney was asked a question. The question, this was on the Hugh Hewitt interviewed Dick Cheney.
I think I saw this.
And he asked him and said, hey, do you think that we're going to see another 9/11 event in the next 10 years? And this was in 2014.
Very shivering.
Very shivering.
I did watch that.
Yeah, so, and Dick Cheney's response was even more startling. He said, absolutely we will, and it will be
Worse.
a nuclear bomb detonated in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
So in the event, in that interview, Dick Cheney says, Dick Cheney said he was part of this, said there's a continuity of governance program that is implemented, and he helped to draft it.
Yeah.
It was originally implemented when we thought the Russians could drop nuclear bombs on us at any moment.
Yeah.
But he was very instrumental in recrafting it. And very interestingly, 2 days before President Trump was sworn into office, President Obama signed an executive order that dealt directly with this continuity of governance program.
Okay.
So anyways, in this continuity of governance program, Dick Cheney said there is a shadow executive branch that is already intact outside of Washington, D.C.
So a foreign.
No, it is, he said they are not elected
They're just not.
officials.
Okay, but they're
He
in the
said,
States.
I mean, they're Americans, but they are not, they're not elected officials. He said we specifically did not want to have elected officials because we didn't want this to turn into a power grab. That's what he said.
Okay. Can I ask you then, because in Daniel 11 you talk a lot about Iran and wars on the Middle East.
Well,
Do you
so,
see any
yeah.
significance in the assassination of Qasem Soleimani in January? And then
There are
the
so
recent
many things
nuclear-
that are significant in the news right now.
The nuclear scientist
So,
that was just killed. a
Yeah,
few days
so
ago.
so you have all of this stuff going on in Iran right now. If you've read Daniel 11, you understand what I'm talking about. If you don't, you know, it may sound like I'm rambling right now. But
Well, I can just quickly, just for people watching, in Daniel 11, you talk about a huge attack. The world kind of gangs up on the Middle East, right?
well, it's because Daniel sees, you know, remember, this vision was given to Ezra as a supplement to Daniel's vision. And Daniel's administration, or in Daniel's vision, he sees President Trump. He talks about him in that vision.
Yeah.
And how he destroys the robbers of the people, referring to, I mean, I don't want to go down all of that, but he talks about it.
Yeah.
And then he talks about the 3 eagle heads and what the first eagle head does. And that when the first eagle head takes power, that there's a reproach to his administration. Meaning people sniff it and, hey, something's wrong. Something's rotten in Denmark. This is not right. What has happened to our country is not right.
Yeah.
Everyone knows it. And that's, you know, Daniel said, there's a reproach on this guy. And he goes and wages war on the king of the south. And then goes after the islands of the sea.
By King of the South, you mean like a southernmost Middle Eastern country.
Yes, that is exactly what I mean. That's why I say he goes to Iran.
Yeah.
Because there's going to be, I believe, that what these scriptures are all talking about is there is going to be, when the eagle head awakes and devours these 2 people, they need to have some sort of incredible event that enables them to supplant the existing power structure. And in my mind, that works perfectly with what Dick Cheney says he has already put in place. And there is the continuity of governance, head location is in, it's in Virginia, and I may get this wrong. It's called Mount Weather.
Okay.
And there is a military intelligence person who was a whistleblower who talks about that. And he says, I've been in this installation, and there is a man who everybody calls Mr. President. And he has a literal cabinet. And there are literally war games and things where the military defaults to him in practicing. Dick Cheney said, we practiced that on 9/11.
Why is Dick Cheney revealing all of this? Isn't this supposed to be secret?
You can go and you can read this you can read parts of this continuity of governance program. There's parts that are classified.
Okay.
But yeah, you can read about this.
Huh.
You can read Obama's executive order that, what Obama's executive order about this was, he gave FEMA the power to appoint any officials they wanted to. They had all the power to appoint governmental officials in a state of emergency. Detonating a nuclear weapon in Washington, D.C. would create something like that.
Yeah. Okay.
So, this is all speculative.
Yes.
But, you asked me, and that's my opinion of something that may happen shortly.
Okay. So that's one eagle head. There's two other eagle heads.
Mm-hmm.
What do they symbolize?
They are all individuals. These are people. They are not three-letter agencies of the government. The first eagle, we're told what happens to him. He dies with pain in his bed.
Mm-hmm.
Then the second one, he takes away the first eagle's reproach. That something about him kind of makes people feel better.
Okay.
He also returns to rebuild the country,
Okay.
America. So he's pulling out of these wars. But as he's returning to America, he, the prophecy says, is taken out by the third eagle head.
Yes.
Third eagle head kills him so that he can get in power.
But it won't look that obvious that the eagle is just going to die, right?
Well, when people are starting to drop like flies, I think,
Yeah.
we're going to be going, what's going on here?
Yeah. Well.
So nothing about this is going to seem right. Nothing.
Okay.
The world will be turned upside down.
So people will notice that it's
yeah,
not
yeah,
right. They're
yeah,
not going to go along with it.
Right. Unless you are going to be willing to take up arms and go and fight against this organization, which I'm not advocating,
No.
then you got to go along with it.
Okay.
You can be angry and you can protest and you can do those kinds of things.
So what will life be like for average citizens during those rulings?
So these three eagle heads, they don't. They want to come in. My opinion is they want to come in and show their leadership skills. Right? They're going to want to show how they can fix this system.
And so it's charm.
I think that they are going to. The third eagle head comes, and what his tagline is, he is going to raise taxes for the glory of the kingdom. So these guys, they don't want a total economic collapse. They don't want you starving in the street. They don't want you losing your house and all of this. They want to retain power. I think they're going to want to have a bright, shiny object that they can blame all of this on. Go over there and turn them into a radioactive dust heap. And then come back and say, okay, we took care of that. Now let's solve all of your problems.
Okay.
So these guys, they're not going to, their purpose is not to make our lives worse. This isn't even going to be the 7 years of trial that so many people talk about.
Okay, because that's another question that has been asked often. When do the tribulations start? After the eagle heads?
So, yes. So,
and then comes the stout horn.
Well, in Daniel's vision, and remember, this really is about Daniel's vision. Ezra's eagle is about Daniel's vision.
Yeah.
It's not a standalone vision. So Daniel saw that, there would be this leader that would come, and he would pull up 3 leaders by their roots and supplant them. And he saw these 10 leaders, so you refer to them as 10 horns. And these 10 horns are conspiring to control the entire globe. It's what their objective is.
And there's 3 that are sort of the head of the 10?
That's correct.
Okay.
So you've got 3 heads of Ezra's eagle.
So under those heads, if we're going to visualize it in our minds, there's 3 heads, but there are 7 more.
So basically think of it this way. I mean, you're going to have the 3 people are in America, but their aspirations are for global dominance.
Okay.
So they need people all over the globe.
Okay.
And so what Daniel saw is these 10, and John the Revelator saw the same thing. He saw these 10 people. And, Daniel sees that this new leader comes and plucks up 3 of the foremost horns. These are the 3 heads of Ezra's eagle. They're taken out one after another, and ultimately, this stout horn is behind all of this. He's orchestrating, he's manipulating these guys.
Okay, so the stout horn. Lots of speculation on who the stout horn is, and you and I had this conversation earlier today. So in your books, you say that the stout horn is not likely to be American, right?
Daniel says that, I don't think the stout horn is anybody who is on the global stage right now.
Right.
Because there is nobody that fits the bill for what he can do. We have not seen anyone like this before.
Okay, so people are speculating now, thinking, is it this person, is it this person? There's some clues.
The answer is no.
Right. So there are some clues in the scriptures that the
Yeah.
person offends women, daughters of women.
Yeah, so it's not Harvey Weinstein.
Right. I know. Well, as soon as I read that, I came up with lots of candidates, but that was, obviously no. That's
the things that the scriptures say about this guy are, Christ told his apostles, hey, this guy is going to deceive the very elect according to the covenant, if it's possible. And if I don't shorten those days, no flesh is going to survive. This guy, Daniel says, this guy comes with devices that he can forecast against the nations. And nobody has an answer to his devices. It says that he has eyes likened to the eyes of a man. It says that he mingles with the seed of men, but does not cleave to the seed of men. It says that he can cause fire to come down from the heavens. It says that he can animate inanimate objects. This is, and the things that he can do are real. This isn't smoke and mirrors. He's really doing these things. And it says that this guy, he pronounces himself that he is God. And people believe him. Christianity collapses. He changes times and laws. In other words, what we think we know, we realize we no longer know what we thought we knew. The laws of physics as we thought we understood them. Everything is turned upside down because of who this man is. Now, you point to any global leader that has those characteristics. Okay? So this guy has not come to the stage.
He hasn't emerged yet.
He has not emerged yet.
Why do you think the Lord would put us through that? Because
that's a fantastic question. So think about, again, the Book of Mormon is the template for us. So what happened, the Nephites were very wicked before the Lord came to America. The Gadiantans had literally overthrown their government. The exact same things are happening right now, okay? The Gadiantans are trying to do the same thing right now. And they are going to succeed. They're not going to be able to throw out our Constitution, but they are going to be running the show. And the Gadiantans were running the show. They actually, the whole government collapsed for them. But there was a time where they were running the show. And so there was an Antichrist, Jacob. And he was behind, he orchestrated the whole overthrow of the government. Just like the stout horn was really the one pulling the strings behind these three eagle heads and what takes him out so that he can supplant them. So you have these parallels. Then you have Christ who he destroys the wicked. Jacob, who leaves and forms Jacob-Ugoth, this city, he's destroyed by fire. Well, the Antichrist is going to be destroyed by fire by Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ destroyed Jacob by fire and his whole city. So these parallels. He destroyed all of these different cities all throughout the Americas. You had cities that were burned, cities that were flooded, cities that were buried.
So would it be the same fire that destroys the stout horn? Is it the same fire that rolls in with the 10 tribes?
Well, let's not talk about that yet. Let's you said, why would the Lord allow the stout horn to do this? And that's the question I'm answering right now. So all of this terrible destruction happened in America. And the wicked were destroyed. And then Christ came. And everybody who made it through that destruction, every single person, the scriptures say, for 3 generations, not a soul was lost. Everyone made it.
Yeah.
Absolutely everyone. So what does that mean? I mean, they made it to the highest degree of the celestial kingdom, right? So project that upon what's going to happen now. We have a wicked world. No one clean thing can dwell in the presence of God. So you have to be on this side or on this side. There will be no lukewarm people. And you need to have a polarizing figure who is going to make it impossible to be in the middle.
Okay.
And so that is why the stout horn is permitted to do the things that he is doing.
Very interesting.
The earth will be completely sifted. You will be on his camp, or you will be on the Lord's side.
And what will life be like for those on the Lord's side? Will we be in our regular houses, working our regular jobs, going to school, or will we be...
Okay, so of this period...
Will there be a call out?
So of this period, Christ said that since the beginning of creation, there has never been anything like what we're going to experience during this. Daniel said in Daniel 12, verse 1, that there will come a time of trial since there was a nation. So it is going to be very difficult. So the stout horn, he comes. He doesn't realize he has a timeline. He thinks he's got all the time in the world to fulfill his agenda.
But really it's about 3.5 years?
Well, I mean, in total, it's about 7 years. That's the 7 years of tribulation.
The whole thing. Okay.
So it revolves around him.
Okay.
And so, because of what he does, the scriptures say that he totally overcomes the saints. In fact, he overcomes the Prince of the Covenant. Now, the Prince of the Covenant is not Jesus Christ, because Daniel saw that when the Antichrist went up against Christ, he was destroyed without hand. He was thrown into a lake of burning fire while still alive. And that's what happens to him, but he overcomes the Prince of the Covenant. So
are those
what
our
the
apostles?
So what happened to the early apostles? the
Not
original
good.
12 apostles, they also were overcome. They were killed, except for John. So what does that mean? I don't know. But I do know that the scriptures say the saints of God will be overcome. The Prince of the Covenant will be overcome. The daily sacrifice will be taken away. And he will stand in our temples and proclaim that he is God. So those are the circumstances. Will they get bad? Yes, they will get worse than they ever have been. Will you be able to retain your home? I think the time will come where you will not be able to retain anything that you have if you retain your faith in Jesus Christ. It's an either or. You can have this, or you can have your faith in Christ, but you cannot have both. And you can't participate in the economy unless you're doing, his agenda. It is going to be bad. Very, very, very bad.
So will we be gathered?
So you asked, will there be a call out? So I don't believe in the call out. The call out, my understanding of the call out is that some people believe that there's going to be a portion of uber righteous saints that are going to somehow be able to escape all of this refining activity of the last days.
Like a rapture.
Like a rapture. The Christian concept of a rapture is not correct. It's based off of the scripture that talks about when Christ is coming on the white horse to destroy the stout horn and liberate the Jews from this massive army. This is Gog and Magog stuff, right? So when he comes, there's 10,000s of saints, and all the righteous are caught up to meet him in the cloud, the living and the dead.
That sounds a lot easier.
That is what the Christians refer to as the rapture.
Yeah.
But that is happening at the very, very end.
So we go through all the rough stuff first.
Yeah. So, but if you're talking about the call out the call out is not going to happen. There has never been. You just look at the examples of the saints that were able to flee from Jerusalem and not be destroyed. Was life easy for them? Was that a call out? Well, they were called out from Jerusalem, weren't they?
Yeah.
But they were persecuted and killed by lions, and they did not escape persecution.
Okay. So here's something. There's been talk in the church of people gathering to Missouri. There's been talk of people setting up stakes in Zion all over, points of light. I'm getting some water, good.
Thanks.
I have some two things. I've got it. Will we be aware, as regular run-of-the-mill Latter-day Saints, will we be aware of meetings happening in Adamondiaman?
I have no way of knowing whether you will be aware of that.
Okay.
But what I do know is that most people's concept of the New Jerusalem is not correct. If lots of people think there's going to be this massive project and we're going to go and gather in the New Jerusalem and build it up, from scratch. And there's people saying, hey, I don't have to worry. We can't be close to the second coming because we haven't even broken ground in the New Jerusalem.
I was going to bring that up. We haven't built the temple in the New Jerusalem. That's on the list. There's lots of other things on the list. And all of the things that you have described, and then all of the things on the list of this happens, the temple in the New Jerusalem, there's others that are on, these are the signs, these are the one at the Dome of the Rock. All of that, none of that has happened yet, unless you consider the Jerusalem Center could be turned into a temple pretty easily. But anyway, so it looks like, if you look at it that way, that we're 30 years out. But the way
but that's not what you read Ether chapter 13.
Yeah.
Okay. There have been many who have seen this, but very few who have been able to talk about it. And Moroni is giving us insight into what Ether saw regarding the last days. And he starts talking about this and then says, I got the kibosh. I can't say anything more about this. Nephi had the same thing.
Yeah.
Happened to him. John talked about this, and Ether both talked about this, and their writings made it into the scriptures. So look at Ether chapter 13, verse 3. It talks about that Ether saw that this country would be the location of the New Jerusalem, and that it would descend from heaven. And John saw exactly the same thing. He saw the New Jerusalem descending from heaven as a bride adorned for her husband.
So we shouldn't be looking for a construction site.
So Christ talked about this in 3rd Nephi. And he said, okay, there's going to be a remnant of Jacob who is coming. And is going to, purge America of wickedness. This remnant of Jacob is going to drive out the Antichrist. And Christ said that when they come, they're bringing the New Jerusalem. And anybody who would like to can then help them build it out. But it's coming with them.
Okay.
So there are going to be, what is going to happen in these last days? Ezra's eagle is nothing. It's nothing compared to what is really happening. And the restoration of the house of Israel, that is where it's at. You need to understand that. Okay,
so I know we probably have to wrap it up soon, and we could talk all night. What time is it? 8:52. Okay, so it's been an hour and a half.
Yeah.
All right, but I don't think, and I think we could do a part 2 at some point.
Sure,
if people want that, if you're open to it. But because I know people wanted to know about the lost 10 tribes, they wanted to know what seal we're in, and they wanted to know about the city of Enoch returning. So we can't cover all of that now. And then, of course, there's the allegory of the olive tree in Jacob 5.
All of these things are totally awesome.
All an hour and a half.
But yeah, we could talk about them for an hour and a half each.
But just to sort of wrap it up, the city of Enoch will return, right? Now, they are somewhere not on the planet.
Right. They were taken up, and literally, if we understand, The Pearl of Great Price is a fantastic book. It's short, right? It's like 42 pages. But in it you have 3 first-hand accounts of worlds without number. We're living in an infinite universe. You have to ask yourself, why did we get all of those accounts in one place? And then you have the Joseph Smith translation of Matthew 24, which is about an Antichrist who comes in the last days. Okay,
so the lost 10, they return after the reign of this Antichrist.
Right, they come and they boot him out. He continues to reign elsewhere in the world. But if you want to talk about a call-out, this is where that kind of a call-out could occur, because America will be made safe. The remnant of Jacob will secure it. Nobody will come to America. The scriptures say that people say, hey, let us not go up against Zion, for its inhabitants are terrible and we cannot stand. And anybody who does not want to take their sword up against their neighbor must flee to Zion, because it will be the only place that's not at war. It's not at war because of the remnant of Jacob and the restoration of the house of Israel and the New Jerusalem and the technology that is here. You can't even get across the ocean. This is made safe. And when the remnant of Jacob return, they have 144,000, 12,000 from every tribe, that go out into all the nations of the earth and bring in the remnants of the house of Israel. So if you're talking about a call-out, that's the call-out, where you're pulling people out from Europe, which will be a disaster. Because the stout horn, the first thing the scriptures say that he does once he's kicked out of America is he seeks to obtain intelligence from those that have forsaken the covenant. He's going, who in the world is the house of Israel? And where were they coming from? And how can I learn more about what just happened to me? And so, it's not going to be good for the saints in Europe. And so there will be a way for them to be delivered. And it's the 144,000, which will be incredible people that will be unstoppable. And they will be gathering people into Zion.
To this promised land.
To this,
Okay.
yes.
Where is John the Revelator? He's over one of these tribes, right?
In the first general conference the church ever had,
Mm-hmm.
Joseph Smith stated that John the Revelator was then with the lost tribes of Israel, preparing them for their return.
And are they where do you think they are?
So this is not a short
Okay.
answer.
So you can't just say they're in
yeah,
the core of the earth. They're in
they-
Antarctica. No.
Yeah, this is a very, very big. I mean, this is largely what this red book is written about.
Yeah.
Right, and it took me 300 pages to talk about that. And I mean, believe me, there is a reason why anyone who spoke about these things did so cryptically. Look at how Isaiah wrote. Look at how John the Revelator wrote. Look at how Daniel wrote. They all wrote in similar ways for a reason. Because if they wrote plainly like Nephi wanted to,
Yeah.
you would not have believed it. I mean, there would be people, if I said, you're not going to believe it.
It just sounds like
It's too fantastic. It's too incredible. But, you know, it is going to rival anything the world has ever seen. Christ said, when this occurs, kings will shut their mouths, for they will see that which they had never heard. And Christ said that though a man declare these things to you, you would not believe it.
And what do you think the timeline is for that?
I know
we're
so
in the
the
middle of it.
kickoff, we're not in the middle of it. We're right on the cusp of this. The Ezra's eagle is kind of the kickoff of this.
Okay.
Right? So, I mean, you have the Ezra's eagle, and then you have the stout horn, and then the remnant of Jacob is coming. So those are kind of the next things to fall. Trump is still in office.
Yeah.
Then we have one more person who is going to be set up for less time than he was. And then, Ezra's eagle, the three heads of Ezra's eagle, start to rise. But I think that is all happening fast.
But the gathering of the 10 tribes is happening now, right?
So the 10th article of faith says, we believe in the literal gathering of Israel. That is happening. Mm-hmm. Your daughter is on a mission, my daughter is on a mission. They are working to gather Israel. Mm-hmm. But it says, we believe in the literal gathering of Israel and in the restoration of the lost 10 tribes. Mm-hmm. There's a huge difference between restoring something and gathering something. The church had to be restored. It wasn't gathered from different parts of the earth.
Yeah. Well, and it also existed before.
Well,
So
the house of Israel existed before.
But the people on earth now weren't alive on earth back then, except for those lost where John is. But
the house of Israel will exist. There was a time when the house of Israel was the country on the planet. Mm-hmm. Everyone came to pay homage to Solomon. Mm-hmm. He received 666 talents, 666 talents of gold every year as tribute from people all around the world because he was the guy. Israel has not been that way since, but it will be restored.
Is there any significance of these people like the Ethiopians recently being returned to Israel a few years ago?
Sure, we believe in the literal gathering of Israel.
So bringing them back to their homeland, this is part of...
It's happening, yeah, it's happening all around it.
But it's onesies, twosies right now?
It's onesie, twosie. If you look at the number of Jews on the planet today, you've got about 16 million. Mm-hmm. You look at the number of members of the church, largely, that's Joseph, 99.9%. Mm-hmm. You've got 16 million. We have largely been gathered. There are onesie twosies out there.
Okay.
But there is a body of the house of Israel. Christ went and ministered to the Jews. He came and ministered to Joseph. And he told them, I'm going to go minister to the lost tribes of Israel. At 34 AD, there were 3 bodies of the house of Israel. I mean, we could talk about this in much, you know.
So those 144,000, they're on the earth now?
I do. So
And
this is a whole new can of worms. I mean, this is a big.
They're going to be sealed in the temple of the New Jerusalem.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, okay. I thought it said that they will be sealed in the temple of the New Jerusalem.
I don't know any scripture that says that.
Okay.
You know, I could talk to you about the scriptures that I know, but this is another big topic.
Nobody wants you to stop talking.
Really?
Everybody is.
Are they still in it? Okay.
Yeah.
Are they? It depends on you and your family and your voice.
Okay. Well, why don't we ask them if they have, if
Okay.
you know, is there anything that before we wrap it up that
Okay.
you know, what would be one thing they'd like?
We answered a lot of the ones they had posted. So one of them was timing of the Lost 10, before Stouthorn or after. It's
Keep
after.
talking. We love this encore shirt going.
Okay. Yeah. So what?
How will we know when the Lost 10 return? You're saying it's this massive, there's no
Yeah,
way to miss this.
This is, if you want to know, you know, what the return of the Lost 10 Tribes is going to look like, and you don't want to read these books, which by the way, you can go to my website, and I already said that, you can download that book for free, the audio.
I'm going to post the website so that people can know where to find the books.
They want to know if they can ask questions.
Yeah, they can. Go ahead and type them in. We have our producer here, Sister Rush, because I don't think I'm getting the questions on here. I'll ask one while you're waiting for the people in the city of Enoch. Have they continued to multiply?
Well, so let's talk about that. So the people of the city of Enoch, and I talk a lot about this in the last section of this book.
Okay.
You need to understand what is happening in the last section of this book.
They like your socks.
Oh, they like your socks.
Oh, good.
They're little planets, if you will.
Yeah. So this Enoch, there were some crazy things that were happening during his time. And this is another big topic. But Enoch was on the earth during a horrific time. And he was told of the Lord, hey, you need to go and preach the gospel. You preach it to everybody except the Canaanites. You don't go there. And there was a reason for that. And if you want to understand that reason, read the last section of this book. It's too long to get into right now.
Okay.
But, so Enoch, anybody who wanted to follow the Lord, rallied around Enoch. And they formed Zion. They became a Zionist society. They were of one heart and one mind, and there were no poor amongst them. They lived the gospel, despite what was going on around them. Now, because of the terrible circumstances in which they lived, which circumstances the vast majority of people hearing me right now do not comprehend, but will be similar to what we will be enduring shortly.
It sounds parallel.
It is another parallel.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, just go to Joseph Smith translation of Genesis chapter 14. Okay? This teaches you a lot about this question. But the people, given the dire circumstances that they were in, they were endowed with power. And that enabled them to survive. And Nephi saw that the same thing would happen to us in the last days. He saw the saints and the covenant people of the Lord. Okay? Meaning Israel that has been gathered according to the covenant. And he saw that power and that they were armed with righteousness and power and great glory. Daniel saw that there would be those of understanding amongst the people in the last days, and that they would teach others. And as a result, people would be empowered and they would be able to do exploits that would preserve the people. So
then that would be given to his covenant, because President Nelson has told us to keep reading about what happens to covenant people. Well, Enoch were those were covenant
This is
people.
why President Nelson is talking about this.
Yeah. So a question then, during the Stouthorn's reign, when we're really in the oppression and you have to be on this side or on this side, and you said that even the prince of the covenant will be overtaken. Will we have access?
Overflown, I believe, is what the word said.
Okay. Will we have access to our apostles and our prophets?
Well,
Yes,
hold on.
yeah.
You asked me about the city of Enoch.
Yeah.
And, are they multiplying?
Yeah.
What's going on with the city of Enoch? So the Lord lifted up that city. And the people were translated because they were going to live in the presence of the Lord. And the Lord made a covenant with Enoch that the day would come when they would return. Him and his entire city. Now, we know that families are the central part of the Father's plan. So to me, it doesn't make sense that the Lord would translate the city and say, no one can have a family anymore. I mean, That's the main component. Now, we may be talking about enormous populations now, right?
Yeah.
But the earth is
whole
largely, the sad truth is, when you read Isaiah, few people are going to make it compared to the 8 billion that are on the planet because of who the Stouthorn is. Remember, Christ said, if I don't shorten his time, no flesh remains on the earth. No. So there will not be many, the cities will be laid desolate. But Isaiah says that in a day, nations will be reborn. You're going to have the earth. Think about what happened, again, on this continent, in the Americas. You had righteous people that lived here and grew and populated. The land was filled with them, right? As numerous as the sands of the sea. And then they turned wicked. And they were utterly wiped off. And a new people came and replaced them. That is what is going to happen. You will have this earth is special. And it's much more special than we have time to talk about right now. I also talk about that in here.
The atonement was carried out here.
Christ carried out the atonement. That is a universal atonement. Again, the Pearl of Great Price talks about worlds without number. Moses saw worlds without number, and he said, and I saw lands, and I saw people upon their lands, and each land was called earth. He saw populated worlds. Who is the Messiah for these worlds? One of the most famous scriptures in the Doctrine and Covenants is from Joseph Smith. It's in section 76. And he says, this is the testimony last of all that we give, that he lives, for we saw him, even on the right hand of God. And then it says, and of him and by him the worlds are and were created, and their inhabitants become the begotten sons and daughters of God. There is this world, I promise you, is famous in the universe. We don't know about them. Yeah. They know about us. Moses was explicitly told, I'm not telling you about anyone else. I'm only telling you about your world. But that's not true for everyone else, because Christ came here. Their salvation depends upon what happened on this planet. And in the Pearl of Great Price, in Moses chapter 7, Enoch, talking about the city of Enoch, the Lord gave him promise, saying, we're going to return, and Zion is going to be established, and the earth will rest. And when we come down from heaven, the people that are on the earth will fall upon us and kiss us on our necks, and we will fall upon them and kiss them on their necks. And then, said, Zion will come forth from all the creations that I have made. Now keep in mind, in the same chapter, Enoch says, if you took the world and broke it down to its particles, and could number all of those particles, and 1,000,000 other worlds like it, it wouldn't be the beginning of the number of your creations. And the promise is, the righteous from worlds without number are coming. So there is much more Star Wars to the millennium than most people are comfortable thinking about.
Yeah. So we asked about whether or not we'll have access to our prophets and apostles in those days during the oppressive tribulations. Me personally, I was hoping to have that to cling to.
Well, let's say obviously, absolutely, we hope that is the case.
Yeah.
But Daniel says that the Prince of the Covenant will be overflown. And our prophet has told us, you will not survive the coming day unless you have the constant guiding influence of the Holy Ghost in your life.
Yeah.
He has also said, hey, in a coming day, unless we have paid the price to obtain priesthood power in our lives, we will not be able to perform the miracles that will be required to save us and our family and loved ones.
Yeah.
It's the same thing that happened with the city of Enoch, the people of Enoch. They needed priesthood power. And if you read Genesis, the Joseph Smith translation of Genesis chapter 14, you'll see what I'm talking about.
And something that I wanted to bring up too, because we've been talking about a lot of heavy stuff. I mean, it's frightening, these years that are coming and the difficulties we're going to face. And when you say that such a very, very small percentage of people will make it, that's scary for us. But I also want us to remember what President Nelson promised in his Let God Prevail conference talk that he gave to us in October, where he said, what does the Lord promise those who keep their covenants? He will fight your battles. He will fight your children's battles and your children's children's battles. And so, for people who are worried about wayward family members and, oh my gosh, how are my kids going to survive? I think we are entitled, if you're keeping your covenants, and we're covenant people, you're entitled to ask the Lord, for that promise, because he's bound and he wants to keep it.
Yeah. No, I think it's important to understand.
When you say they're not going to make it, is there?
So let's talk about that.
Chance.
I'm talking about, the earth is going to be swept clean of unrighteousness. Mm-hmm. In Joseph Smith History, chapter 1, verse 37, Moroni comes and quotes Malachi to him and tells him, in the great and dreadful day, the wicked will be burned as stubble, for they that come will burn them. He's talking about the restoration of the house of Israel here. So wickedness, there will be no wicked people on the planet. You will have to choose your side. Your children will have to choose their side. Now, let's pause here for a moment, because this is frightening. Because Many of our children have chosen the wrong side already. We have loved ones that have chosen the wrong side. And we're saying to ourselves, what hope do they have when the stout horn comes?
Yeah.
So in the last conference, President Nelson also talked to us about one of his granddaughters who was,
Jill.
her view was myopic, right? So when we're talking about life in the second estate, we need to understand that the second estate is not over when we die. In fact, for the vast majority of God's children, the majority of their second estate has been spent in, the spirit world.
Yeah.
And the spirit world, remember, this is a plan of salvation. The Lord is looking for ways to magnify us, to bless us, to enable us to become like Him. He's not trying to condemn us. That is not what He wants. Hell is a part of the spirit world. It's a place where people will have experienced conditions that will help them to turn to the Lord. And we know from section 76 in the Doctrine and Covenants that they can repent. It is not over. And they can accept Christ and they can have their sins remitted. Or they can choose to do it themselves. But
it's a lot easier in the spirit world to.
Well, the conditions, George Albert Smith said, the conditions in the spirit world for accepting the gospel are 1,000 times better than they are now.
Obvious.
And I would say that's probably understated.
Do you want me to ask some of the questions?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. I will read them and then you can
Okay.
choose which one.
So we're going to answer someone's question. Can you
Yeah.
not find a question, babe? Or you're just looking for one that's not
I
too
can't
crazy?
access that because
It's somehow stopped.
Oh.
It like, I can't see the ones, I just saw them and now it's,
okay.
cut them off.
Okay.
Let me see if I can.
Okay.
Shoot.
So, yeah, I mean, the point is it is not over. I mean, for people that are swept off of this earth, it's not over for them, just like it wasn't over for the Jaredites and the Nephites that were swept off. There is a massive reclamation program in play in the spirit world to reclaim these people. So.
And those ministering angels are able to help us. Do you believe that as we do temple work to give our ancestors power and get them endowed with power, that it will give them more power to help us through these tribulations?
Well, Elder Bennhoff talks about the promises that are associated with doing temple work, and help from the other side of the veil is absolutely part of that. I mean, who's more who has more of a vested interest in your success than your own family members?
Yeah, right. I am also not able to find the questions. Sorry about that. Do you see any?
Here's some,
While we're waiting for that, I would like to.
here's one.
Oh, okay.
How does the timing of the Antichrist in Ezra's Eagle line up with the burning lamp of Revelations?
I believe that, and unless you've read my book, this book on Revelation, you don't know what that question is asking me. But John saw wormwood, which is another. He saw an object that was burning as if it were a lamp descend from heaven, and it was wormwood, and it poisoned the waters. So from a scriptural perspective, wormwood, Jeremiah used this term to talk about false prophets, and even antichrists. So wormwood is symbolic of somebody who is a false prophet who is going to poison the waters, meaning the living waters. Wormwood, if it went into water, it would make that water bitter. So Christ describes himself as the living water. You've got wormwood in the living water, poisons it. People abandon their faith in Jesus Christ. This is what we're seeing happen. John saw that happen after the silence in heaven ended. The silence in heaven ended in approximately 30 minutes after the first seal was open. So the fact of the matter is I think that those two things are one and the same event.
Okay. Are we in the seventh seal?
So that's a good question. So did you see the solar eclipse?
Yeah.
Were you here in
Yes.
Tennessee?
Yeah.
Well, so did you have glasses to watch it?
I watched it through a box.
You watched it through a box.
Pinhole.
Could you really tell that a solar eclipse was happening without your box?
No.
You couldn't, right?
No.
I mean, it was astounding to me
Mm-hmm.
that how much light there was when there was just a sliver of the sun.
Yeah.
So, we get the impression from the book of Revelations that we've got these 1,000-year periods, and they're cut and dry, where, in most of, I refer you to my book on Revelations because this is a fascinating discussion that I'm not going to do justice to here, but what all of those different seals mean is very meaningful to us in our day, what John saw regarding all of them. But these periods, we're a unique people because we're living during a transition between two periods. And it's like a solar eclipse. So, one period, they're kind of merged, right? The defining event of the sixth seal is the great and terrible day of the Lord. And the defining event of the seventh seal is the millennium. It's the reign of Jesus Christ upon the earth. So we're having these two seals butted up against each other. Mm-hmm. And there's some things that, for example, the calling of the 144,000. That was an event that was to take place during the sixth seal. So, this is an interesting question to think about. How could you have, if we're in the seventh seal, how could we not know about the 144,000? You ask me, are they here on the earth? Well, I'll tell you this. John talked about, most of what we know about the 144,000 comes from the book of Revelation. And John said that the 144,000, you get 12,000 from every tribe. He saw that they were all virgins. Yeah. They were high priests. And they were the first fruits unto God. The phrase first fruits means something. And I don't know of another instance in which that is used that it is not associated with the resurrection. Or at least, hey, you're no longer mortal. You've been changed. So we could not feel those numbers. We do not have 12,000 virgin high priests from Naphtali and Gad and Asher and Dan. We can't do it. We only have 20,000 members in all of Russia, men, women, and children. We can't do that. We don't have those numbers. They're coming from somewhere else.
They're coming from somewhere else.
Okay, do you want me to read the other ones? Do you want to pick one?
Which is interesting to think about.
Yeah.
We don't think about those other tribes that much. We just don't hear about them.
But this is throughout the scriptures. We haven't seen it.
Yeah.
But it's there. It's everywhere. So yeah, if you have not read A Remnant Shall Return, you've got to read that book. So you have another question,
Okay,
babe?
I will read, I'll read off 4 or 5, and you can choose one, and then talk about the other ones if you want.
Okay.
Okay, the first one is, talk about Earth as a prison planet. Will the stout horn be working behind the scenes with the eagle heads before the world knows he's there?
Yes.
Can Trump win?
Yeah. So the answer to that one is yes. I mean, the Earth as a prison planet, that is a big thing. I have an entire chapter just on that. So I refer you for the answer to that, to the book of, A Remnant Shall Return.
Okay, for the prison planet
Yeah.
question.
Yep.
Okay. And then Eric asks, will the stout horn be working behind the scenes with the eagle heads before the world knows he's there? Sandra
Yes,
asks.
yes.
Okay.
He doesn't, and this is another very interesting fact that I'll just add. Not only is the stout horn working with them, he gets inducted into the secret club by them, right? One of the, this is kind of a dark little rabbit hole, but we've all heard about Epstein, right? And
Yeah.
the horrible things that happened with him. One of the very curious things that Daniel saw was when this largest of the first eagle heads is in power, he meets this mystery man and gives this mystery man the daughters of women.
Yes.
Not women, their daughters. Okay? Epstein was doing this to gain leverage over people. These guys do this to try to get leverage over the stout horn. But the stout horn is nothing like what they've ever seen. And so the stout horn is in the club. But he learns the entire organizational structure of this deep state. He knows everything about it. And one of the first things that he does when he gets power is he utterly destroys the deep state, the Whore of Babylon. He burns it with fire. It's gone.
Yeah, and that Epstein, you just devote a couple pages to it in Daniel 11. It's
Yeah, just because it's not a fun thing.
No, it's not fun, but it does kind of give us an inkling of how deep things go. And how many people are involved, and the fact
and
that,
why people don't leave the deep state.
and the reason why there was a reason why it was daughters of women, because that is illegal and more scandalous, and therefore black.
Yeah, I mean, holding an affair over someone's head, anymore those are happening all the time in Washington, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Holding pedophilia over someone's head, whole different ball game.
Right.
Okay, someone asks, when is his third video on the Lost 10 Tribes coming out?
If you go and you watch my video on the Father's message, I did a 2-part video that really talks about that. I need to do another video. I just really don't have very much time. Usually I'm traveling, I'm working 60 hours a week, and I was able to crank out some videos because I was on vacation. So yeah, we'll see. I want to do that, but you can watch those. I mean, I have so many other books that I want to write. I'm writing a book right now that I'm so excited about, but I just don't have time. I don't have very much time.
They have a family, a job. Yeah.
Okay, Tiffany asks, when the stout horn destroys the deep state, do you think that is why many are deceived, that he must be a good / a savior of sorts?
Yeah, it says, Daniel saw that he obtained the kingdom by flatteries. I mean, if you can show that all of this wickedness and he roots it out for you, this guy is a good guy.
Yeah.
And I mean, on top of that, he turns the world upside down with the information that he brings and shares.
And you also talk about him doing all these, like, making fire rain from the sky. It's like magic tricks. What kind of...
Well, it is...
Those kinds of powers?
I mean, there is no such thing as magic, right? He has understanding of the laws of physics that we can't comprehend. His technology exceeds our own. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Sandra asked, can Trump win and then be taken out before his next term ends and the prophecy still be fulfilled?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there are many ways that Ezra Siegel can be fulfilled. So it's hard to know. I mean, there's so many different avenues.
I am going to hold up the books again, and while we're here, I also want to say a thank you to Mike Crowley. Mike Crowley lives in California. He's married with 4 daughters, and he is the one that started this Ezra Siegel page because he wanted more people to have this information.
Great.
And so it was his idea to do this Facebook Live.
Well, yeah. Thank you, Mike.
Mike says buy his book so we can make this his day job.
Yeah, so you can write more than you don't have to work.
I would love to be able to do that.
So the books are A Remnant Shall Return. That's the first one. And the one that Mike says you need to read.
It's easier. You can wrap your mind around what's going on. Daniel 11 is an easy read.
Daniel 11's a quick, easy read. These all make good Christmas gifts, too. I feel like I'm on the Home Shopping Network. And then there's Revelation, the vision of John the Divine. I love this one because I love John.
That book
awesome.
is awesome, but it is not the first book you should read. John, I mean, that's like the graduate study of everything that has to do with the second coming, the great and dreadful day of the Lord. There is a reason that John was supposed to write these things, because he has a major role in those events. So I would not recommend that if you haven't read any of my books that you start with Revelation. I would not recommend that.
And I'm going to post the website where you can order them. It's called The Lost 10 Tribes. That's the number 10.com.
Lost10tribes.com, and again, you can download the audiobook of The Remnant Shall Return for free.
Yeah,
So.
that's right. All right.
All
I think we had a good run. Make sure it saves, okay?
Okay.
Because there will be people who want to watch this who missed it. Thank you, Michael Rush. Thank you for your time. We know you're really busy, and
Yeah, well,
I'm glad you still have a voice.
Yeah, I love talking about this. I just wish I had more time to do it.
Yeah. But thank you. We'll probably do a part 2 in a few months or something.
Okay, sounds great.
Yeah. And thank you to Sister Rush for your help.
Yeah.